Whatever. We don't have to be perfect.
No, we don't. Thank you, Allan.
In fact, there should be a little imperfection in everything, like a Persian rug, right?
That's how I feel about it.
Only God is perfect.
Iowa.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Horus Rising and Metaphysical Egypt. Welcome to Metaphysical Egypt. I'm Alan Peoples with Patricia Awion-Lehman. Hi, Patricia.
Hi, Allan.
Our website is horusrising.com, and I'm really excited about this episode. We're finally going to get into the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, it's a meaty one. There's so much, again, so much material. We're going to try and fit it into two parts, starting off with part one, and just to introduce you to the concept of the birthing box. Powerful understanding of ancient symbolism. So we're going to start off with Hathor, and I say with Hathor, and here we're looking at an image of the Virgin Mary. It's cool because it's from it's from the Church of the Virgin Mary in Zaytun in Cairo. I love going to this church. They also speak about a sighting. There was a sighting of Mother Mary in this church as well.
Oh, an apparition.
Yeah, apparition. So really fascinating and wonderful place to visit. And the symbolism within is incredible. So you look at her arms are in the Ka position, right? And Ka is life force, right? That's everything, right? And she's in the stars. She's in the primordial waters of creation, if you will, right?
The waters of noon, nothing,
exactly,
none.
Overhead. It's the cap of Ptah, right? We just pointed that out.
Yeah, it's the underside of the skull cap of Ptah.
Exactly.
Unbelievable. And I bet there's 12 windows around.
Well, of course there are. So again, we are star-seated. Can't be any more clear. And here we see on the right is Hathor, right? And this is from a special chamber in the temple at Dendera, dedicated to Hathor. And on the ceiling, you actually see the image that I have here. It's a pen and ink, but it's Hathor's head rising on the horizon between these beautiful two trees. And that's the symbol for the horizon there. And what you're really looking at is those two trees on the horizon are creating the symbol of Ka, right? Life force, which is, she represents the birth of form, of life in a physical body. And so each one of those trees, there's names written in hieroglyphics when you look at the ceiling. And if you come to Egypt, I'll point this out. I asked the guide who was with me what they said, and he went back and looked it up, and he said one was a tree that is on earth, right, form, and one was a tree from heaven. So again, it's, that moment when heaven and earth separate, we have life force. And that is, the beginning of our perception of reality as physical beings. And so here we have, as I've written, Hathor and Mother Mary, the beloved, rising on the horizon, Horus rising. The horizon here mirrors the Ka symbol and its conflict between polarities that sparks that first sound. Sound always related to birth as the spark of life. It is the life force from the primordial egg of potentiality. So another way of looking at it, huh?
That's so true. And think of a chick breaking out of an egg. What starts that process is the sound of the beak tapping on the shell.
Exactly. And again, I've pointed out before, it's why we have so many storm gods. It's sound and light, that cracks, the cracks, like you said, the egg. So yeah. And so the Ka itself is forming what? A kind of birthing box, right? That's life force. And so I've shown an image like this before, this papyrus, where you have the Milky Way, you have Nut bent over, and holding her up is Shu. He has the one feather, and Shu is holding her up with his arms in the Ka position. But what she's creating here underneath, you see Geb, and he's down at the bottom.
The one outstretched.
Right, almost in a sine wave position, if you will. representing the earth. And what's in between, right, is Shu, air. And what you don't see is the unseen force of nature, which is Tefnut. They are air and water, right? Separating heaven and earth, right? We have our four elements. And so the Ka is the life force that separates the air and water, is the life force, Shu and Tefnut. As Gemini, on the ceiling at Dendera, they represent Gemini, the moment when the twins split, polarities split. So again, this beautiful image holding so much knowledge as a birthing box of sorts. And so sound, light, and running water. Hakim always said this is what the Giza Plateau was all about: sound, light, and the temple, sound, light, and running water combined to create life force on the earth. And when there's harmony between these forces of nature, there's a greater sense of peace and connectedness. And of course, when there's disharmony, then we're separation consciousness. And so the healing power within the harmony of sound and light frequencies can be represented. This is an image of the Simatawi with two images of Ha'api again. He is, this again represents the breath of life. And we had just showed him in the last presentation, he's pouring the two waters for the annual inundation, annual in a year, annual in a great year. Which brings new life, the life force, water. They're all expressions used to refer to the manifest energy of the entire universe. It's a creative power that is constantly surging around us and inside of us. It forms the energy of consciousness and synchronizes all of our bodies and the earth's physical functions. So what is the tree of life? Well, the Simatawi is the tree of life. It is the breath of life. We're seeing the earth, the seed planted in the earth, the roots down, the nurturing below the soil, and then the breakthrough to the day cycle of the tree spreading its branches and bearing fruit. And this is a beautiful, Dr. Deborah Carter directs the Core Center. I believe she's in Alabama, and she came on a couple of tours with me. I think she was with us when we went to India, Allan. She wrote this in one of her newsletters, and I wanted to share it. The tree of life is a metaphor plus the blueprint of the universe and how it functions from the macrocosmic level to the microcosmic level. It's the pattern for everything. The tree actually is the best representation of this in nature on Earth. The tree of life is broken into 5 basic levels, which are responsible for the creative process. There is the ether level, space, the air level, the fire level, water level, and the earth level, each working together to create a balance with each other. And what's interesting is you hear about some of the South American cosmology speaking about, the earth, there's the air cycle and the water cycle, and and in Egypt there's the 5 cycles of consciousness, and it'd be interesting that you see it related also to these 5 elements, moving our way up to ether. And again, that was something we talked about in India.
Right.
We did the 5 elements tour.
Exactly.
Which was spectacular. It was really good, even though we got a little templed out.
We should do it again.
Would I do it again?
I said we should do it again.
I was going to say I would go back to India in a heartbeat. Just so much there. But here is this beautiful painting. I just, every once in a while, something moves me, and it's called Water, Lifeblood. Just beautiful. Anyway, back to the birthing box. So on the ceiling at Dendera, it's quite interesting. There's this beautiful, huge ceiling, and it has all of the zodiac signs, and then it has panels that speak to the moon and the cycles of the sun and the elements, and so much on these ceilings. But when I came to Egypt the first time in 2005, the whole ceiling was black, with soot all over it. So it was really hard to see the images. But when I came back in 2008, I believe, half the ceiling had been revealed. And it was so incredible to actually see the imagery. They had restored it. They have chemicals now to bring the original paint forward, and it's so incredible. So what the whole ceiling looked like is what you see in that little square. And then, of course, they were working on the other half, and today we have both sides completely clean of the soot, except for this one little square on the right side. And so it is anomalous, and it drew my attention. And I discovered that is a very important place in the cycles. And we are going to do a whole presentation on this ceiling and Dendera and how important it is. But this particular block holds the image of a Netert called Neheb-Kau. And Neheb-Kau is the provider of cause, or the vital energy, at birth. He's also there at death. And I find it fascinating because this position is in a particular place where I believe it begins the process of our being birthed back into form again. And of course, he would have to be there. And in a way, I call this a birthing box. And we also know of a black box that is related to Saturn, and it has to do with a storm and the sacred geometry of it.
You're talking about the Kaaba?
Well, it's Saturn, the planet itself. Of course, there's the Kaaba.
Oh, you're talking about the anomaly,
the
hexagon on Saturn,
which is on Saturn.
Exactly. A hexagon is a cube.
Well, it creates the black cube, exactly, and we see that black cube, as you point out, the Kaaba stone, but also at the Kaaba where they house the stone, but also there are black cubes on display in many cities all over the world. Mm-hmm. And people wonder why. And I'm going to point out that it is incredibly important as a birthing box. What's fascinating is this particular image of Neheb-Kau is right near Saturn. On the it's the planet of Saturn related to Capricorn on the ceiling at Dendera. So again, there is a connection, in my opinion, and very possibly, I don't know why they left it. Part of me wants to think maybe it was black.
that it actually is cleaned, but it is black underneath.
It's possible, or maybe they left it for a reason. I can't even imagine. But I find it fascinating that it is in the place that I would have placed it if I were going to place a black box on the ceiling, which sounds really ridiculous. But once we continue on, I think you'll understand.
Have you ever asked the guardians of Dendera if they know?
Well, it would have been the original restoration team, and you'd have to track them down because, rumors get started and you really can't trust what might be said now. You'd have to go to the source.
Good point.
At least for me to actually state it as a fact. And I'm not stating these things as fact. I'm just offering different ways to look at what we're looking at here. But when I have a fact, I definitely will let you know. But at any rate, Neheb-Kau says in the pyramid text that I am the outflow of Nun, again, the primordial waters, the one who emerges from the waters. I am Neheb-Kau, the serpent of many coils. So again, speaking, can we relate him even to Draco?
The serpent of many coils is the sine wave pattern.
Well, exactly. And the sine wave being life's breath, first breath. It's a recipe for life and a physical perception from the birthing box. And on the other side, in the age of Cancer, or in the zodiac sign of Cancer, if you will, you see the soul of Ra as the Kepler beetle, and the Kepler beetle is indented, and it's coming out of the leg of Nut, and it's going to be emerging. To me, it's basically the seat of conscious perception, the seat of consciousness. And Nut is giving birth to the sun as the face of Hathor. And again, she is the seat of form. She gives birth to a physical reality. And if you look under her chin, you can see that image again that means Rasto, the first time, the first breath, when the waters recede, the mound emerges, and the image itself has black and grayish blocks on one side and white and grayish blocks on the other. They're basically the pillars of Joachim and Boaz. In medieval symbolism, it represents the polarity. So we are born into polarity as the seed of form. And at the top, I have circled in red, there is a little bark, a boat, with a lotus flower on it. And from the lotus flower, you see emerging the snake, the serpent, right? That is the life force, right? That is the Ka, the Ba, the spirit. It's being, dropped into the form with the seed of consciousness. This is creation of the physical perception of reality. From what? Newt, the box, the birthing box. One way of looking at it. So in ancient Egypt, the female womb was held incredibly sacred. It was the most sacred thing, the ability to create, the ability to give birth. And this is from a birthing scene at the Temple of Kamambo. Isn't it an amazing way to depict birth?
It's not at all how women give birth now.
Well, no, not at all.
She's not lying on her back with her feet in stirrups.
And they didn't. And I'm going to show you some of the ways and the tools that they used, which has to do with the birthing bricks and the birthing block. And I mentioned the Hanuti in the last presentation as well. And the Hanuti, as Hakim called them, were the undertakers. And they initiate the patriarchal paradigm in Egypt. So when we fall into form, and in the age of Taurus, when we fall completely into form, this is when the Hanuti gain power. And they are the priests, which were the undertakers, the ones responsible for telling us that there was death, that they gave us our belief in death of the physical body and the fear of what happens after death. Will we be eaten by monsters? If our heart is heavier than a feather, the judgment scenes. Mm-hmm. So at any rate, this comes from Kathleen Cooney. And Kathleen Cooney, she's an incredible Egyptologist, and she wrote this in Gender Transformation and Death. And she says the ancient Egyptians went another step and brought notions of masculine potency into their funerary beliefs. They thought that their dead needed to actually transform into manifestations of the gods of creation and regeneration, Atum, Osiris, and Ra, in order to harness the powers of masculine sexuality and be reborn into the next world. And we mentioned this again in the last presentation. To harness the powers of the masculine sex and be the solution worked well for the men of ancient Egypt, whose bodies naturally contained such regenerative power, but such a physical notion of rebirth was obviously problematic for Egyptian women. During dynastic times, the Egyptians believed that a dead woman the creative spark needed to be reborn. Essentially, Egyptian women had to shift their gender and masculinize themselves in order to enter the fields of peace and other realms of the afterlife. So what I'm pointing out here is a shift from this great reverence for the mother and the ability to create and give birth to a time period when, the women were basically not, when they were at one time, the women priestesses and priests were equal. Eventually that separates, and the men, the priests become far more powerful and the women are denigrated to a lesser role. Mm. And I point this out because when we think of Egypt, people ask questions and, the answers are usually multi-level because different time periods believe different things. And we see this degradation again of our perception of falling into separation consciousness, which everything changed. The mythologies changed. The festivals changed, the rituals changed. And we have to remember that when we look at mummification, it might be something that is used to manipulate rather than, what they had done in the more ancient times, which was more of a spiritual nature.
Right. Just think of Western civilization in the last 2,000 years. We're talking about a period of 4,000 years. How much changed, in that time?
Exactly. And I found this image, believe it or not, at Tunis. We went into the tomb, I believe, of Sphinx, one of the later dynastic pharaohs, and I couldn't believe I saw it right there. This is one of the priests. You see, he has a cat face, and the priest's name is basically Hanut.
Yeah, I see an H, the newt jar, the T. I'm not sure
and
what the
the and
cross is.
the and the eye, the so it's it's Hanuti, right? Isn't that amazing? So yeah, the Undertakers. So we talked about Atum and the creation, right? Atum as the atom. And I mentioned that, they say Atum creates oven by himself. Here's an image of Min, or Atumin, creating oven by himself.
Mm.
But what they don't mention is at one time, Hathor was the hand. It wasn't oven by himself, but of course the feminine was required. And there was a feminine, like a female and a male unified, like netter or understanding that it wasn't just we all come from a man. That's not possible, right? I'm kidding. But Hathor was the hand. In a physical perception of reality, they understood form and earth to be masculine and the non-material world of the heavens to be feminine. So, of course, Nut is a feminine netter. So Hathor columns illustrate her connection between heaven and earth. She becomes the portal or the wormhole, if you will, the stargate through which form is born.
Mm.
So, when you walk into any temple, the floor is always the earth and the ceiling is always represents the heavens. And so that space in between is the life force, right? That's where Shu and Tefnut hang out, right? Life force. And so as you walk back through the temple, the ceiling comes down and the floor starts to get higher. And by the time you get to the Holy of Holies, you're at that place where heaven almost touches earth, right? Mm-hmm. The most powerful place in the temple. And so these Hathor columns are showing her face is at the ceiling, right? The heavens. And the column is that portal, that connection between heaven and earth. And you don't see only her and Bess, and this is really important, the Netert Bess. These are the only two that you ever see depicted in, columnar format, except for Osiris himself, who we'll talk about as a Jed pillar. Mm. So, yeah, fascinating. And the image I have in the middle here is an image you'll see that represents a pregnant woman, or in this case, Hathor. The birthing box. This is a Greek image, right? Or they say Roman Ceres, Greek Demeter. But as you can see, this is representing the female seated, but her lower half is the birthing box, her womb. One of the most ancient Greek goddesses, she guaranteed the fertility of the land and protected against agriculture and vegetation. It is, of course, a highly mineralized paramagnetic energy that she contains within her womb. And I love that, she has a dove in her lap, which I find fascinating. But
well, isn't that the symbol of Isis? Into a...
Well, exactly. This is definitely a Greek form of Isis. Thank you for pointing that out. No doubt about it. Just sitting on the throne. The throne is Isis, right? Mm-hmm. The Per'ah. Isis wears the throne on her head, showing that she is the seat, right? The womb, the seat of power, the creative force of nature. So yeah, in a way, you can call them Mother Nature. And this image is so beautiful. You can find this now in the New Civilization Museum. It's basically an image of Nut giving birth with the assistance of two Hathors. And she's inside the birthing box, right? So, this image of the birthing box, it's so profound. And these boxes are also resonant chambers. So when you see these chambers and they're empty and you put your head in and you start to tone, you'll feel the resonance because the energy of the containment is so powerful. So again, relating to sound.
Mm.
Um,
Think of it like a tuning fork, you know.
Exactly. Some people say, oh, it's like a telephone booth, right? Well, what is a telephone but a communication device, sound, an interdimensional portal, if you will. And that's what it is. It's this portal between heaven and earth. You know, they believed that we came from the light of the stars. We are light beings, right? Liquid light becoming form. And it's just, you know, an imagery to represent this. On the right, you see it's basically a sort of Bridget, Brigantes, an English goddess of spring, streams, river, and water cults, fertility, within the containment of this portal.
Mm. Between the two pillars again.
Exactly, the birthing box, the duality. And here again, here is Newt over the pregnant Hathor, forming this birthing box that from which Hathor gives birth to form. And then the cube statue with Hathor and the high priest. There's so many of these, and they're so beautiful. There's one with Hapi, and in the form, in the shape of this birthing box. And remember, he's the fertility of the Nile, of the floods, with Hathor presented in front of him. And this is what you call, it's hard to see the imagery, a birthing brick. And this was found at Abydos. And the women used to stand 1 foot on one brick and one on the other in order to give birth. So again, the symbolism of the brick representing a form of birthing box. Now here is an illustration to give you a better idea of what was painted on the brick. But you can see that the woman is sitting on this throne, again, a birthing box. Sometimes there was a hole in the seat and they would give birth somehow through it. Just fascinating to consider how they did this. But yeah, always having to do with the birthing box. And here you can see, remember I showed you the 2 trees? And these sticks are to represent the sycamores, right? Lady of the sycamores. This is again the duality through which life is born into. We are born into duality.
What is it about the symbolism of the sycamore that relates to Hathor?
Well, the sycamore is a fascinating tree. The sycamores, we have date sycamores in Egypt, and the dates are precious. In fact, there's a beautiful place. It's called Virgin Mary's tree. And they say that Mary, Jesus, and Joseph had stopped there. And it is this sycamore date tree. And the dates, they discovered there is something inside the dates that heals skin ailments. And then this place itself became a place of healing. People still go today on pilgrimages for healing to this beautiful site. And it's in the middle of Heliopolis, or that section of Cairo today, which is a bustling area, and it's hard to find. We always have to ask for directions. And you go into this enclosure and it's like an oasis. It's a place of peace. It's incredible with this beautiful ancient tree that keeps growing out of its, it dies and then the twig grows from it and it just keeps renewing itself, life, death, and rebirth. And I also read that there is something in the sycamore that is anti-aging. So again, representing eternity. So healing and eternity and life-giving, life force.
So they definitely recognize the plant for its medicinal properties.
I believe so. Absolutely. This is across the board. There are other trees, like the acacia and Osiris and Ptah with, I can't think of it right now, but another tree that has healing properties. So yeah, and the women are often the olive tree with the olive, the olive oil, and the life-giving properties from that. So yeah, again, it's again the way they would, display in metaphor and symbolism these deep understandings. But here is wonderful imagery of the woman actually giving birth on the birthing bricks. And on the bottom lower corner, I show you an image of a Netert called Meskhenet, And she's related to the heavens, and she basically is a birthing box. She's
Yeah.
a black box, right? So again, this imagery is so important, and its connection to you know, this sacred, iconic imagery that we're still using today and have little understanding of its meaning. And here you see the two sycamores again. So in between the sycamores, she gives birth to form. And they use these in everyday life. And here we have the sun god Ra rising from the 8-petaled lotus blossom that grows from water in the box or coffin below. Look at this. The birthing box from which emerges the lotus, which gives birth to the sun, basically. Just beautiful imagery. Primordial waters in the birthing box. And again, here you have this beautiful sycamore. I always tell people to look at the space in between the forms, because
Right.
it's
The negative space, right?
Exactly. They made great use of all the space in their artistry. And here you see there's a sycamore tree between her two arms, and there's, it's coming out of a birthing box of sorts. Between her two hands. So again, this imagery that, if you don't look, you're not going to see it. But she is the lady of the sycamore. Both
right. Her hands are on the Aket, on the horizon.
Exactly. Well, here is the Aket. So absolutely. And what's again fascinating is Nut is actually from the picture I showed you before. She represents the hair of Hathor. That gives birth to the face, and the face being the nomen, right? Now that you're born, you have a name, you have a separate frequency from other forms, right? And so the face is your signature.
It's this passing through Hathor, which gives us our individual
Our identity.
signature. Right.
Exactly. And it's her face that is shown throughout all the gnomes in Egypt. It changes just a little to show the signature identification of that particular gnome, which is, again, a fascinating use of an aspect that is so important.
And a fascinating thing to think about, that the land itself can dictate how the people look.
Well, it's because, again, if you consider how the earth is shaped with the angle of the sun hitting it, they're showing us that the angle of the sun hitting the earth has an effect on the identity of that which is there, right? So depending on which gnome you're in, which latitude you're in, I believe it's latitude, yes, it changes basically the personality of the people that are inhabiting it.
Incredible.
It is incredible. So here's this amazing Meskhenet, and I love that we have a Netert shaped as a birthing box, and the other one you see her sitting on the throne. They're both Meskhenet, and on the far right is an image of Taret, another one of my favorites, and she has a lot to do with the pole stars and the circumpolar stars, and of course she is like a great grandmother. She's involved with the birth of everything from, in our universe as we see it. And so in ancient Egypt, women delivered babies while squatting on a pair of bricks known as the birthing bricks that we just showed you. Meskhenet was the goddess associated with this form of delivery. Consequently, in art, she was sometimes depicted as a brick with a woman's head, wearing a cow's uterus upon it. So in the second image, you see she's got that headdress with the curls coming out. That is to replicate a uterus.
Interesting.
And at other times, she was depicted as a woman with a symbolic cow's. Yeah, sorry, just said that. So Meskhenet, one of the most ancient Neteru, symbolized birth and was the creator of the Ka, the life force, right? Which she breathed into each individual at the moment of birth. Similar to Neheb-Kau that we just talked about. And she was also associated with fate and often appeared in judgment scenes. And yeah, she was often at the, in the corner of the judgment scene, which I find fascinating because she's about, the birthing, and she's there at death. The birthing box. Here she is again. And you see her with the Manet necklace, right?
Hmm.
This is actually the one side of the Manet necklace. And here again, in this, this is Amun Min inside the serpent, which is creating the birthing box just before the sunrise.
Hmm.
So he's in basically giving birth to the new perception of reality into a day cycle.
Right. Yeah. Between the two lions, right?
Between, right.
Yesterday and
again,
tomorrow.
yin and yang, polarity. Yeah, always the same thing, only different. So yeah, they were used, as I said, in the judgment scenes as well. So they were used for the deceased, really pointing out to us and illustrating that every end is a new beginning, right? There was no death. Just her presence is telling us this. So the four mud bricks, this is from The Magical Bricks and Bricks of Birth by Anne Macy Roth and Catherine Rohrig. Four mud bricks inscribed with spells from chapter 151 of the Book of the Dead are often found in the burial chambers of royal and elite tombs dating from the New Kingdom. These bricks can be shown to represent the four bricks that supported women during childbirth. The use of bricks in the mortuary context is thus metaphorical, replicating the equipment of an earthly birth in order to ensure the deceased's rebirth into the other world. Such bricks may have also been used in the opening of the mouth ritual. Again, the opening of the mouth is, restoring the breath of life,
Right.
both at funerals and in temple foundation ceremonies. So they would even do an opening of mouth ritual when they had just created or built a new temple. You're opening the mouth of the temple and, and giving it its life breath, the life force, because the temples were built to be alive. They're living, breathing entities. So,
And that spoon-shaped tool they use to open the mouth is a representation of the Big Dipper.
That's right. Star seeds.
Which is
Anyway,
also Tauret, correct?
Iowa. Well, it's all connected. Yeah, she's connected to the Big Dipper in a big way. So in connection with their role at birth, bricks also appear at the judgment of a person faced after death, as we pointed out. Like other artifacts surrounding birth in Egypt, bricks of birth had parallels in ancient Mesopotamia. So yeah, these rituals were not just exclusive to Egypt. Yes, I can't get enough of this gal. The black box in ancient Egypt can be related to the birth of form. Women stood, and again, I know I keep pointing this out, but it is really, really important that it's not just, a mechanism for, women to give birth, but the symbolism behind it is what makes it so profound. And also related is the concept of the sarcophagus or box that the deceased body would be placed in after the death of the physical form, because it literally, sarcophagus, the name itself literally means eater of flesh, right? Digestion of the physical. And this is what happens at death. We are no longer contained in body.
This is like we were talking about in the last episode, where you replant the seed back into the earth.
Exactly. And as we've said before, every end is a new beginning. There is no death. This is so important. This is a wonderful image of Neheb-Kau. Again, he's seated here on a birthing box, on a throne. And before him, again, is this image of the sine wave, Neheb-Kau, as this beautiful serpent, the breath of life, the life force itself. And this is what I was saying at the beginning of the presentation. This is where he is on the ceiling. And this is the representation Tauret is holding via this looped sort of chain. She's holding this image of the bull, which is the Big Dipper. Here is Sagittarius, and Capricorn is right here. So Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, but we take in this whole image as one understanding. And Neheb-Kau sits here and representing this black box, as we said, that we see everywhere in different areas on the planet. And it keeps us, this black box keeps us tethered to a space-time reality symbolized by this black cube. It's just it's just fascinating. And I want to add this by Walter Russell because I think it's so beautiful. And you know, he's my hero.
I'm just thinking of carbon as the black box. Life is based on carbon. Carbon is 6 atoms.
Yes.
The cube has 6 sides.
Yes. Excellent. And you're absolutely correct.
I don't know where I'm going with that, but
no, you're going. What you're
connection.
saying is absolutely true. It could be the reason it's black. I relate it to the black earth as well, because I believe Kemet, you know, the name for Egypt, it was really speaking about physical reality. You know, that Kemet was the entire earth, the physical perception of reality in its, you know, base meaning. It comes to mean just Egypt. And that blackness, that is carbon. You're absolutely right. That's what makes it the black earth.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, please. Anytime. I get carried away, as you know.
I wouldn't call it that, but.
Well, I know I do. But anyway, I included this this message from Walter Russell. I find him fascinating. But he says, in my universe, there is but one form from which all forms appear. That one form is the pulsing cube sphere, 2 halves of the heartbeat of my dual thinking. All forms pulse, therefore all forms are 2. One form for the in-breathing pulse, which generates, and one for the out-breathing, the radiating one, right? So we have our Simatawi again, right? That great breath. The cube is the sphere expanded by the outward breath to the black rest in cold space. And the sphere is the cube compressed into the incandescence of white hot suns by the inward breath. For to thee again, I again say, all things are light, and light separates not, nor has its bounds, nor is it here and not there. Man may weave the patterns of his self in light of me, and of his image in divided lights of me, even as the sun sets up its bow of many hues from divided light of me, all our many frequencies and colors of us. But man cannot be apart from me, as the spectrum cannot be apart from the light of me. Verily I say, every wave encompasseth this, every other wave unto the one, and the many are within the one, and down to the least waves of me. So isn't that beautiful? It's like the breath out from the unified me, right? All into the individuated aspects of me experiencing life. And then I breathe back into me again.
And we create this with every single breath we take in and out.
Exactly. Isn't that just beautiful? And I love his use of cube, the physical, and the sphere as heaven. It's this breath in between heaven and earth. That is the life force. Just beautifully written. And so we complete the first part. And it gets better because in the next part is where we start getting into the Ark of the Covenant and the relationship and what it actually means. Again, many, many, many levels of meaning of this powerful symbol for something, so many different things. So yeah, stay tuned for part 2. It gets better.
Really unbelievable stuff. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Allan.